It's more than just steel and gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
All right. Hello. Welcome, Martin Sellner.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. And Konstantin von Hofmeister, recurring guest of the show. So thank you so much, Konstantin, for putting this together and introducing me to Martin, who is a fascinating character, an Austrian, I guess you would, I don't want to really call you far right, but, anti-immigration leader. You're kind of a combination between like a Charlie Kirk and a Tommy Robinson. Except more handsome than both. So,
come on. Thank you. Showered with compliments, but you saved it with the last thing. I think there would be some differences between them, but yes, I'll try in a way to combine like journalism, activism, and theory.
Yeah, and very smart. What I really want to talk to you about is your propaganda. So your symbolism, your phrasing, the way that you put things, and sort of, you read these stories about you. I read the Washington Post story, and it seems like you've got this amazing like fight club thing going on in Vienna for like young men. So I definitely want to hear about that. But let's start about with just you and where you are. What's up with Vienna these days? Are you in Vienna a lot? Vienna is this great historical city, yet nobody talks about it really anymore. Like what's going on in Vienna? What's today's Vienna like? Uh-oh. We lost your sound there. What happened to your sound? It was working 1 second ago.
Now again?
There you go. Yeah, you're back. You're back.
To change something, yeah. No, you're right. Vienna once was the most important city of the world. At one point was one of the biggest cities, the most millionaires of the world living in Vienna, incremental for the history of Europe. At the moment, unfortunately, this glory has faded away. Vienna is not so important anymore. But what is still left is its beauty and its cultural significance. I grew up there, was born there. I'm based there also as an activist. But today, like all Western European big cities, Vienna is suffering a lot from massive migration, Islamization. We have knife attacks on a weekly, almost daily basis,
Wow.
Gang rapes. So that's unfortunately happening in Vienna right now. But in a way, also, I think Vienna might be the first city and Austria might be the first country that could experience a real shift towards remigration from all the Western European countries, the countries on the west of the former Iron Curtain. So that's the situation right now. I think what will happen in Austria and Vienna in the coming years would be very interesting and maybe a window into the future of Europe.
So this word remigration, as far as I understand it, it means sending them back. Is that what that means?
In a way, yes. It means to reverse the migration flows. So I would say remigration is an umbrella term for all measures, legal, cultural measures, political measures to revert the Great Replacement and make us a dominant majority in our country again, and also ensure that this will last in the future. But obviously there are different versions of remigration. So when the AfD talks about remigration, the FPÖ mentions remigration, they have a slightly different understanding, the more radical ones and less radical ones. I think a good comparison, if you want to just go into like the meaning of the word, is when you look at the word communism. So communism also obviously is something. There's a lot of meanings, but in a way it's clear no property on the means of protection of private property and more egalitarian society. And I think that's the same for remigration. So the goal is clear: stop the Great Replacement, save our ethnocultural identity. But then people differ a bit, like how to achieve it, how quickly to achieve it, etc.
Got it. So this Great Replacement, people call this a conspiracy theory, right? People say that this is not real. So what does the Great Replacement mean, and why do people say it's a conspiracy?
It's a very good question, because obviously remigration is the answer to the Great Replacement. First of all, it's obviously real because we have declining birth rates since the 70s. The baby boomers didn't get any children. This will haunt us now soon when they all retire. And instead of having our own children, we imported foreigners. It's called replacement migration. And that's where we have the term the Great Replacement. And replacement migration is an official term used by the United Nations. You can still look it up on the homepage. Replacement migration, a solution to an aging population. So it's absolutely visible everywhere. The old indigenous people in Western and white countries are dying away. And the population growth only stems from replacement migration or replacement births by migrant communities. And now to the conspiracy theory. So that obviously different theories why the Great Replacement is happening. That it's happening is completely undeniable. But then there's certain theories why it's happening. And those disingenuous, we call them Lügenpresse, lying press people, they just pick one theory, which is hard to prove and quite easy to disprove. So the Great Replacement is a 200-year-old conspiracy by the lizard people. And then they say, well, and that's why the whole thing is a conspiracy theory. So that's how they do it. I always bring up the comparison to make it easily understandable. There are a lot of theories why Rome burned. Was it Nero? Was it the Christians? Was it the Romans? Was it an accident? The Jews? Whoever, a lot of theories. But everybody knows that Rome burned. And that's the same with the Great Replacement. It is happening. Everybody knows it. And I'm more invested in the question how to stop it than who's really responsible.
Got it. So there was a great quote in an article about you somewhere. I don't think it was actually from you, but it was talking about this issue. And it was like the whole world is constantly telling Austrians, and of course Germans, that they need to be protected against the Hitler within. And I thought that was very, very well put. It's like everybody in the world has this idea that they better not, like they have this Hitler within them, and it's just waiting to come out. And it's like it's going to come out. And if we don't censor them and make sure that they're completely controlled, the Hitler's going to come out, right? But I'm sure growing up in Austria, you're constantly propagandized against that, right? I mean, you're probably constantly told this is bad. So what's that like growing up? I mean, how did you become aware of this stuff as a young guy if the entire world is trying to prevent you from having these ideas?
That's in Austria and Germany, I really, we call it Schuldkult, the guilt cult. It's kind of a civil religion that's intended to break the spirit of the German people and the Austrian people. And this happens in school at a certain level. Suddenly you start to read certain books. One is called Damals war es Friedrich, like he was called Friedrich, or When Hitler Stole the Pink Bunny, like the children books about the Holocaust, and all of them,
Wait,
what
is the Pink
No, but
Bunny?
Constantine is laughing. He knows the books. You don't have to read these books. Then at a certain age you start visiting like museums, sites, concentration camps.
Right.
And I stumbled across a study by one of the most famous and best German youth psychiatrists, and he actually studied that, and he saw that this it's called Holocaust education has a very, very negative effect to the psyche of young pupils. And after this kind of education kicks in, the identification with their own country completely crumbles. And he published it in a scientific journal. He calls it a process of collective de-identification. And the patriotism levels of Germany are just like the lowest of all of Europe. And they made a poll where they asked young Germans, if they would be reincarnated, if they would like to be a German again, and 80% said no. And that's how much they hate their own national identity, and that's why you have an anti-German Antifa in Germany. So I really think it's a very huge psychological operation, an abuse of history, obviously, because it's not about history, it's not about commemoration, it's about achieving political goals in the present. And I think it's very important for Germany and the German people, if they really want to survive this century as a people and as a culture, to overcome this programming and have a normal relationship to their identity again.
Yeah, I mean, nobody should be taught constantly just to hate themselves, right? But certainly there is some lessons from the Hitler era, right? I mean, is that what can be taken from that? I mean, there's something to say that shouldn't, like, do we want to blow up Europe again? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
No.
what's the part of that that should be left behind? You know?
No, you shouldn't misunderstand me. Obviously, you should confront your history, with all it peaks and lows and all the good things and the mistakes. I'm not for like covering everything up and forgetting everything. And also I'm not for glorifying everything. This is just the other side of the coin, of this constant demonization, keeping something alive all the time, and for the historification, if you can call this in English. Like, look at it in an historical and neutral thing, see all the bad things that happened, and then just categorize it, understand that's not where we want to go again, and then just finally go into the future. And that's, I would say, the sentiment of most Austrians and Germans. They just don't want to be controlled and psychologically operated by their own history again. And what you mentioned about like this claim that there's a Hitler and an evil Nazi hiding in everything and behind every shadow, that's also a good trick, a political trick, because it's like hunting a ghost. And obviously there is no Nazi party today anymore in Germany and Austria, so everybody can be accused of being secretly a fascist. And I think that's also just a political trick to not talk about issues like identity, like mass migration, population replacement, because bringing this up obviously is a conversation ender. And it's a control mechanism. It's a bit hard, obviously, to get out of this because you can always make the mistake, tap into that. For example, when Alice Weidel said Hitler was a communist, I don't think that's a good response, because we know that Hitler was not a communist, but like trying to push him to the left camp as a libertarian, I think that's a wrong strategy. I think the right strategy is just to understand how this is being used as a control mechanism, talk about things that actually matter right now, and in a way, shut down this psychological operation of controlling people by guilt. Because I think that's highly immoral, and also it doesn't solve any problem we have today.
Hitler hated communists, didn't he?
Yeah, obviously, but of course, if you look at it from a libertarian angle, then the Nazis and the communists both wanted a totalitarian state. So I think that's basically the reason. I think the just left-right dichotomy doesn't really work when you look at the Weimar period, where you have liberal humanitarianism on one side, communism, and then fascism, National Socialism. So that's way more complex. But I just say, like, in the end, we have been controlled by an abuse of our own past. We've been controlled by this psyop in a way, and I think that's very important to overcome it. Have a normal identity, and I agree with you. There are some lessons. So where we should return to is a completely normalcy, loving your own nation, loving your own identity, no chauvinism or hating other cultures, or like feeling that you're higher than them. I'm really not for any idea, an ideology of supremacy. That's definitely a lesson we can take from history. I agree with you.
So the story with you coming up is that you were once more on that side of things. I'm not calling you anything, and then over time, I think part of the reason why you've gotten more normalized, you've gotten more power in a good way, is because you've said, I'm not a Nazi. I'm not in that anymore. So was that an evolution for you? Like, when you were a young guy, were you more angry and then you kind of got over it? Or was it just learning enough? Or was it like, why did you have that evolution?
Yeah, I think obviously as a young person, you want to be very radical. And like everybody who knows how you are when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, if you're like into politics, I think it's very hard to find somebody that age who's not looking in a way just for the border of everything and always for the most extreme thing. I think it was obviously kind of deal of provocation. My parents, like my family, were conservative. School was completely left wing, and at some point, I was meandering between left wing and right wing political points, just researching and reading. And obviously, with going ultra right, you could just shock everybody and piss everybody off.
Right.
But in a way, I would say it was also the only political option that was existing at this time if you didn't want to join a political party, which I really didn't want that back then and today. I was into political activism. I was looking for a group, a gang, comradeship, like a movement. And these were the movements. This was the subculture that existed at this point. Like the only people who made demonstrations, who had cool music, who had their own style of clothing and their own strong group identity was this subculture, which still exists today. But I would say today in the Germanosphere, it's way less present. And for me, the step away from that began when I was actually starting to read, especially the conservative revolution. I would say the conservative intellectual tradition of the Germanosphere. And then I understood that basically what I had before wasn't a real ideology or Weltanschauung, as you might say in German. It was just a bunch of phrases, of subcultural ideas, of lyrics from music I was listening to. So I would say my real political identity later formed as when I became an identitarian, and that was really what I identified with, and that it was also easy for me to step away from the subculture, especially since I then understood, like politically, also apart from this ideological distance I then had, because I'm an identitarian and an ethno-pluralist, and in a way like affiliate to such an ideology. But I also understood this on a strategical level that I would say the subculture is being used by our political opponents and has been used for decades to make it impossible to talk about issues like identity, people, national identity, and especially mass migration. So I would say in a way, I also was used as a pawn in my youth, to demonize this. And I just don't want to become a cliche demon that is willfully or not willfully helping the political opponent. And what I also later learned is that in this political subculture, you have a very high rate of fads, of political agents. There are really a lot of them. And I don't want to claim that everybody who's in there is a fad, but obviously if I was now a regime, then I would like to be my opposition as radical, as aggressive, as violent, as supremacist, and as cliche and over the top as possible to scare people away from it and to shut down any discussion about the actual issues. So that's these were my understandings ideologically and strategically. And all of this, and it was a debate going on in the whole German right at this point, a lot of people being disappointed with the old right, OLD, not alt right, the old right. And this was the emergence of the identitarian movement in the 2010, 11, and then finally 12s in the Germanosphere. Sorry, long story.
No, it's great. It's fascinating to hear about the cultural elements of it, like music. Like I don't think we have that in America. We don't have like secret, punk Nazi music here at all. So it's interesting that exists there. And I can certainly see the appeal of, especially when you're being indoctrinated all day long, of going and getting involved in that type of thing. I totally see it. But you're also completely right that that's exactly what they want, right? They want you to go become a caricature of a Nazi, and then they get to take your picture and put you on the screen and say, this is who's anti-immigration, is this, this punk Nazi guy who's coming to kill you, right? So, that they do have here. Right? Did you hear the story recently of the kidnapping plot for the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer? Did you see that?
Yes, I heard about it. I only know the rough details, but
yeah. So they did a podcast on it, and it was like all feds. It was like three to five feds and one non-fed, and of course that's the guy they threw in jail. So everybody was a fed. It was just they were all trying to push each other on to do something violent. So I think that's exactly right. Right.
We had feds. We have clear proof of feds who tried to lure us into doing crazy, more radical stuff. So that's what they always do, the agents provocateurs. And I think the big problem is you have this dichotomy. Either you have to be a liberal or a Nazi, you know. Either you have to be totally like an anti-fascist or a Hitlerian, and that's what you have to decide. And there's no in between, no gray area, no other dimension of thinking. And this, I think, like this black and white dichotomy is a tool, obviously, for political opponents. We're just rejecting it, and that's what they really don't like. That's what they dislike, and that's, I would say, is also explaining the huge success of the whole new patriotic movement across the world. That we are rejecting this alt dichotomy, and we are really talking about the issues that matter to people in a way that people really do understand. So I think that's basically the key. To understand all of that, but it's a fun story that you brought up, and unfortunately, it's way more often and frequent than a lot of people think. Especially now with the internet, it's super easy with fake accounts. We had a lot of we know a lot of proof, and the news articles. There are hundreds of fake Telegram accounts, X accounts in Germany, run by federal agents who are all in all these kind of groups. And they have the license to hate, so they can commit hate crimes without any problem. They just have basically a carte blanche. They can do whatever they want, and it's the same, you know, in a group, and everybody is like doing a hate crime, which I think it's stupid that we have this kind of thought crimes, but they exist. And then there's one guy who's just joining along, and then he goes to jail because he wasn't a Fed, and that's happening on a daily basis in Germany. The homes are raided because of posts and of chat groups.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. No, just a quick question, because Isaac, you mentioned earlier that basically the Germans are brainwashed because of Hitler and the Nazis, obviously. But I think this phenomenon is prevalent all over the white world. I mean, in Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, everywhere you go. So it's not just Germans that are guilt tripped, right? I mean, Germans have the Nazi past, but you can look at Sweden or Denmark, right? Like, you think completely innocent countries, even they're guilt tripped, right, into accepting non-European immigrants. Americans are guilt tripped on a daily basis. They just, I don't know, what do they use? Slavery, Confederacy. They always find something, right? So I think the phenomenon is like a phenomenon that you find in every single white country in the entire world, pretty much.
Yeah.
I can recommend this book here. It's the German version, obviously. It's called Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt. Obviously, you know it, Konstantin, don't you?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the book, right?
Yeah, it's quite a thin book, and it explores how it's called the therapeutic state is using guilt in a way to implement a politics of multiculturalism. I would say great replacement, and that's you're completely right. That's a tactic. It's a political tactic used everywhere, and then you always find something in the history of the people to use for this politics of guilt. It's so I can just recommend it. It's a very good book. Everybody, I think, should read it. It's also very scientific. It was published in 2002. Paul Gottfried, Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt.
So, yeah, no, they definitely do that to us in America. I mean, I grew up in the most left-wing possible environment. So for us, it was not even, it's like for you, it was probably a little more obvious. For me, it was like the fish, you can't tell the water you're swimming in, because it was so completely pervasive that I didn't even think about it until much later on, when I was like, oh, I was being indoctrinated that whole time.
Which state was it, if I may ask?
I grew up in Evanston, Illinois. So it's a very liberal suburb of Chicago. Really, it is the Black Lives Matter lawn sign capital of America. It's the white guilt capital of America.
And you went to college there, or like what was your education, if I may ask?
No, I went to public school, about half black, my school. And so I really was very, involved in all of that. And then I went to college in D.C. I went to a university called George Washington. It's a sort of B grade private school. And then I went to law school at Tulane Law. So I do have a law degree. Yeah. But
And how did you become like? Sorry if I might ask.
No, yeah,
just
no,
on
please.
your intellectual journey, like what brought you then in a way on this in this dissident sphere that you end up with people like us in a stream?
I mean, like you, I was always very edgy, in any way. I had my period as a Marxist for about 5 minutes. But ultimately, I think it was just when Trump came up in 2016, I could really see what was going on. Going to law school definitely made me much more conservative because you see the bullshit, like you see how the sausage is made, And I also had a profound thing where I used to write for Vice, so I went to do this. I did a tour of the Rust Belt in like 2015, and I saw the factories, Youngstown, Ohio, Gary, Indiana, Pittsburgh, Detroit. I saw the destruction, and I was like, there's no way that this can stand. Like, there's no way that it literally looked like Syria. And I was like, this is like a nuke went off in this part of the country. Like, there's no possible way that there's not going to be a reaction to this. It was like, I remember I interviewed a guy at a steel plant in Pittsburgh. He was like, 20 years ago, there was 75 steel plants here, employing like millions of people or hundreds of thousands, and they are all gone, 100% of them gone, like zero. And I was like, that's insane. There's got to be some response to this. And then as I saw Trump rising, I saw the way the media treated him, and I saw the way people treated me when I started being like, hey, maybe we should listen to this guy. And so, that was just the beginning of it. And then it was, you see how deep the rabbit hole goes once you start asking questions, right?
But I think it's very interesting because I think a lot of people have this experience that just confrontation with the reality makes them in a way right wing, because it's very easy to be left wing in this shielded little enclaves, and then you convince yourselves and everybody else that the rain is not falling down but it's going up. But if you really confront yourself with reality, which can be grim and hard at some point, and look at things realistically, whether like in a social issue when you were talking about it, or for me it was also like about immigration, then I would say you just become more right wing. So I think experience and reality is our best wingman.
Yeah, it's seeing with your eyes is pretty much what happens. So what is the history of immigration in Europe? Because I've had people on here to talk about the Hart-Celler Act, and here we had the 1920s to the 1965. Basically, the borders were closed. Nobody ever talks about that, and even really smart people don't even know it. So, how did the borders of Europe suddenly just go down? Like, what's the history there?
It's a good question. I will focus on Germany and Austria because obviously it's a bit different in France because of the colonial history and in the UK. But in Austria and Germany, it all started with the program Gastarbeiter. In the late 20th century, 60s, 70s, we had a lot of first Italian and Greek people coming to work in Germany and Austria, and then Turkish people. And a lot of Turkish people came. There was a contract with the Turkish state, and first it said that it would just come here and to work for a season and then go back. And then there was a huge media campaign that they could stay here and bring their families. And this was the first non-European enclave, the non-European population that was settled down in Germany. And then you had a refugee crisis in the 90s. These were mostly Europeans that came, so this migration was mostly European, but it was also strong migration. And then the floodgates to non-European mass migration, especially under the context of asylum. This was done beginning of the 2000s, peaking 2014 and 15. But since the 70s, we had a declining birth rate, and the population growth in the past decades was only due to immigration and the children of migrants who are keeping the birth rates high. And so what you see is a huge population replacement, because if you did not have a mass migration to Germany, the population now would be like 15 or maybe even 20 million people lower. And in Austria, it's the same, and in most other European countries, it's the same. And now, if you look at a lot of German cities, if you look at the young population between 0 and 14 years, 40%, 50%, 60% with a migration background. So at the moment, Germany is not majority migrant, but it's only because you have so many old boomers, but they will never have children again. They cannot even father or mother children anymore. They will die out. They will also they will not create new parties, political movement, invent new stuff again. They're at the end of their lives, most of them. And if you look at the youth, if you look at those people who make up Germany in 50, 60 years, Germany is already a multinational state in a way, because of this massive process of population replacement. And that has happened in almost every Western European country. It was the biggest taboo. You were never allowed to talk about it. It was covered up. Still today, it's hard to get any data. And I think it's a huge crime to our children and to the European nations. Because of that, we're going to grow up in societies like Lebanon or Syria that we see right now. South Africa will have a constant ethnic warfare. There will be no democracy anymore, because there cannot be a democracy in a multinational, multi-ethnic society where people don't have a common and shared history and common and shared identity. That doesn't work. And obviously there will be also a lot of violence. So that's what a future looks like if we cannot revert this right now, stop it, slow it down, and then reverse it. I think we have a time window till 2045. At this point, what I would call ethnic vote, the demographic collapse of democracy will happen, because then the non-European migrant populations who have been naturalized and their children are so big that they are such a huge voter bloc, especially Muslim voters, who dominate the UK election already. That's why the massive rape was covered up. They will form such a huge voting bloc that it will be quite impossible to bring in remigration, different migration policy, and de-Islamization by votes. And at this point, I think we'll have crossed the demographic Rubicon, and nobody really knows what's going to happen then, but it's definitely not going to be pleasant. And that's why I want to have an organic and democratic change before this happens.
Have you read Submission by Michel Houellebecq?
Yes.
Great book, yeah. Right? And that's kind of the answer to what it's going to look like. Just slow, right? Cultural takeover, right? Where suddenly you can't eat pigs anymore, in the restaurants.
But that will be also just in a way, because imagine if in Vienna 1/3 of the population of the youth will be Muslim, and then there will be some old and gray Europeans to tell those youth, you're not allowed to wear a wheel, although a majority wants it. So at this point, they might just democratically elect, like they elect the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, like they elect an Islamist government in Algeria right after the French went away. And then we just might have a democratic way, just as you mentioned in Submission by Houellebecq, to Islamic-dominated, foreign-dominated Europe.
That's crazy to even imagine that could happen to Europe. So does it seem, though, like particularly because of the efforts of people like you and Constantine, are people waking up now to this problem? Are people? Is it? Has the Overton window shifted at all?
Yes, it is also shifting. Right now, it has been shifting, I would say, since the 2015s and 12s. That was exactly when the AfD was founded, when there was a massive movement called Pegida,
Oh yeah, you hear about
You heard
that.
maybe about it. And Generation Identity was founded. So I wouldn't say it was only due to this migrant crisis 25. It was also because a new patriotic movement was formed, in a way a bit like MAGA, that made this idea of populism, right-wing, national conservatism, call it as you want, paleo-conservatism, like mass applicable, appealing to the masses, because it was just done way better. And we have seen that the Overton window is shifting, first slowly, and now I think we are reaching a tipping point where it happens slowly, and then you have just a jump, and a lot of things happen. I think especially with now Musk, with X, with Zuckerberg, with all the companies dropping DEI and wokeness being beyond its peak, we're gonna see a huge change. And already you see right-wing governments forming everywhere in Europe, in Italy, in the Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden are completely changing. In France, Meloni, 40%. There's also going to be a right-wing change at some point. Now in Austria, the Freedom Party has won the last election, and they will probably form a government which will be the most right-wing government ever in Austrian history, after war history. And in Germany, also the AfD is rising on 22% right now, in spite of all battles. So I think the one way or another, we're going to have a backlash in Europe against this mind virus, against multiculturalism, against the Great Replacement. And I think there will be remigration policies in many European countries within the next 5 years. I always say we're not radical, we're just a bit early with our ideas.
Yeah, some people complain though, like especially about Meloni, for example, like because she's been in power for quite a while, but she hasn't really done anything to change the situation. So a lot of people are saying that, for example, the AfD in Germany should be careful of the Melonization effect, right? Where you basically say a lot of things before you gain power, but then you do actually nothing when you're in power to actually affect changes. What do you think about this?
Good question and good point. So Meloni, she also, for example, has never used the term remigration. It's always a very good measure. Remember the comparison with communism, like those people who don't use it and shy away from using it, like Meloni, also Le Pen in France, very often also don't really want to have a change, but just a few little reforms. And Meloni, I think what she's really missing also, and it's not only her fault, is a strong patriotic civil society. So I'm all about metapolitics. I think that in American discourse it was called politics is downstream from culture. Yeah. Culture, society, mass media, activism, that's where the real power lays. And I think that's also missing in Italy in a way. Just one example to talk about practice, not theory. When the Freedom Party was in government in 2017-18 in Austria, there was the Migration Compact, the big UN migration compact that was formed. And we made a big rally in Austria, a big campaign, petitions, demonstrations, while the Freedom Party was in government, that Austria should not sign that. So we pressured our own party, sort of a patriotic activism against, or I would say like to wake up a patriotic government. And we created so much pressure, in a way, positive pressure, that the Freedom Party didn't sign it. And then it was like a domino effect. Many other countries didn't sign it. It was a huge backlash for the globalists. And I think that's also what's missing in Italy a bit. There has to be an active civic society who holds right-wing parties accountable, inspires them, and in a way gives them also positive pressure from the street, like just Black Lives Matter or the Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future movements went on the streets, although we already had left-wing governments. And I think that's the antidote to this Melonization. I also fear it, but I think it will always happen because politicians have a tendency not to do anything, to appeal to the power, the media, which is the real power holders. And that's why we need a way more active right-wing civic society.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, you mentioned earlier that you're opposed to all kinds of supremacism. So what is your opinion of Franz Boas and cultural relativism. Do you think it's applicable to the current situation? Because I know that, for example, Alexander Dugin values him quite highly, as do I, because I think cultural relativism is completely compatible with ethnopluralism, as is multipolarity, because they're basically the same thing. The multipolarity, just concerning civilizations, and ethnopluralism, ethnic groups in a given territory living together, but each of them given a certain amount of autonomy. And the whole notion of multipolarity is that you don't have just one superpower or one hyperpower, like lording it over the rest of the world, like you had until recently with the United States, which is now changing, because now you have different poles of power. Like you have Russia, China, India, the Islamic world, and America's might is visibly going down, like its influence globally. So if you look at Franz Boas and cultural relativism, he basically says that you have to view each culture not through the lens of your own culture, but you have to view the culture based on its own traditions, basically. Like, would you agree with Mr. Boas?
In that sense, yes. And I would say like I'm ethno-pluralist in the sense that I think that you cannot escape a cultural bias. It's irreducible. Everybody has a cultural bias, and to find an objective point of view, obviously, where you say like this is the non-cultural, just objective judgment. That's impossible. We all have our cultural bias, but I'm a hyper-cultural relativist in the sense that I also understand and see that cultural relativism in itself is an ideology and an idea which is in a way bound to the European history of thought and only exists in that sense in Western European very late philosophy, which also in a way has to be, in my opinion, understood. That this idea of cultural relativism is also, it's very unique to us and very unique to our state of mind at the moment. And we have to understand that most other countries and cultures don't think like that. And I think most cultures, most people also have this sense of, I would call it ethnocentrism, which means in-group preference, being proud of themselves, cherishing themselves, really liking themselves. So this idea of being hypocritical of our own people and nation is very European at the moment. And I think at the moment what Europeans need, what young European men need especially, is not more cultural relativism, more like critique of themselves, more abstract, like distancing themselves from their own standpoint, but more just pride in themselves. But I think like being proud of yourself, being ethnocentristic in a way, doesn't contradict respecting other cultures, understanding that those people have their own totally unique and I would say very valuable approach to reality and understanding of reality. And especially when you now go to the geopolitical level, that we should have a world system in the world in which those cultures can survive. So I'm a national conservative. For me, my nation, my people, my culture is the most important. For that, it doesn't have to be the absolute and abstract best. I always say, even if our IQ would go down, our national IQ, of my people, like 15%, I wouldn't switch to a different nation or sports team, as Elon Musk has put it, but I would still fight for my own nation, because it's not about what is best. Like I don't fight for my country because the West is the best, but because it's mine. But I think that as being a nationalist in the English language, I would say identitarian, fighting for my nation, I also want to have a system in the world which is beneficial to national identities, which preserves national identities and does not destroy them. And for that, I think you need to have a sense of ethnopluralism. You need to have a sense of intercultural dialogue, understanding other cultures, because obviously, if your approach to reality is there is no moral, my nation race is the only right, and everything I do to kill and subject and exterminate others is good. This is obviously morally wrong, and it will alienate everyone, destroy you, and destroy your nation in the end. And I think that was the big problem. Dugin brings it up, but many other people, that ethno-nationalism, right-wing national conservatism couldn't come up with an idea that was able to organize a big space, that was able to get many nations on board in a way, and to compete with this big universalistic ideologies like liberalism or communism, which were able to organize great spaces, which were able to win over the elites of many nations and then form kind of a new church, and a new international elite that could hold those big spaces together and organize huge armies. And I think that's a very important step for right-wing thinking, for national thinking, national conservatism in the future, that we find a way to live out of differences without immediately starting to hate each other, kill each other, trying to create ideologies of supremacy. And for all right-wingers who want to learn this, I just always suggest them to look at the Balkans. You have this like array of tiny nations. Most even Western Europeans cannot tell apart, and they all hate, not today obviously, but in the past they all hated each other. Every nation thought that they were the original Serb, Slavic people, and they were the greatest, and they should have the great empire, like keeping all of them together. Sorry for my long rant, but I think that obviously is something that doesn't work. And if an old right would stick to it, it would not be beneficial to the survival of our nations and of our ethnicities. So very complicated question. This is my answer. I'm not the typical, I would say, ethno-pluralist, cultural relativist after Benoit. I'm more into Guillaume Fay's understanding of that, but I completely agree with you that we need to understand that every culture is valuable, that we need to find an ideology and a world system in which cherishes all cultures and tries to preserve all cultures in a way.
Interesting point, Constantine. Yeah, I think he's trying to say that cultural relativism is kind of how you let white people off the hook from their... I mean, in America, it's certainly true that the people who are the most, in their minds, racist are the most liberal, right? Because they're the ones who actually can't handle the cognitive dissonance between thinking that IQ is everything, yet black people have a lower IQ. So they can't deal with both of those things. So they have to create a fake bridge in their mind that says, black people have the same IQ as white people, if not for racism, right? So that like fake bridge they build in their minds is they build their whole ideology behind that, and it's of course insane because it's not true. Whereas if you simply believe IQ is not everything, that's how you get out of it, because it's like, all right, well, we care about IQ. These people maybe don't care about IQ. Big deal.
True. I think it's the most important to understand that value itself is something that is very relative. Because obviously, if I say the most valuable is aka technologically advanced, then it's very easy to say what's the most valuable. Right. But if you say having the highest birth rate is the most valuable, well, then other are more valuable. And even if you say it's about power, well, at the moment, we are not very powerful. And if you think everything is just a survival strategy, the only time you could tell which is the best race, ethnicity, or nation is if the whole earth would end and the game would be ended. So I think from this standpoint that we are contingent in history, society, and culture, it's very hard to talk in absolutes. But obviously there are differences. You can measure a lot of differences. You can talk about a lot of differences in complexity. But for me, like when it comes to the term supremacy, obviously this is a question of value. And here it's hard to talk in objectives. What I always bring up as an example is if you look at languages, you have this, we live in the same world, with the same objects and phenomena and the different terms for the same phenomena, but it would be very hard to say what kind of word, like if it's tree or Baum in German or Arbre in French, is the true and the right and most valuable one. So that would be quite impossible, just different words for it. Obviously, in the end, German is the superior language to all the others. I mean, that's clear. But apart from that, I'm a cultural relativist. Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, look, white people are not, again, it's the people who really think white people are the best at everything that are the biggest globalists. And it's white people are not the best at everything. Look at why is my neighborhood just burned down? because we're way worse at fire management than the Native Americans. No fires burned like that for 10,000 years here when it was native. The only reason fires burn like that is because they stopped burning they stopped doing controlled burns, and that was pure white people. And so it's like, it's not, white people are not necessarily the best at everything. Like sometimes they're just not good at shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, to look especially how high cultures came to be, and why there was Rome, why there was the Mesopotamian culture, like what brought them up, what brought them down. Obviously, you have this approach where people say it was always just like white people. I think it was the March of the Titans, this idea, but then there are others who think it's like just cultural factors. Very complicated issue. But I also have to say, I think these are very like abstract questions. I always really like to talk about them, read about them, but for the real political issues and questions, I always try to be very goal orientated. And I think at the moment, what white people really need is more pride. So I'm very happy that you see all these edits now about white culture, about white excellency, about being proud of being yourself, and about a history and identity. And obviously they are not always nuanced and like quote Boas or no offense, Constantine. So I'm very happy that this happens, because I think that's exactly what people need right now. On a higher level, on a theory level, I think, yeah, definitely you need to understand this question of relativism of perspectives. And I also agree that this idea that of Western supremacy and the West is the best, and civilizational imperialism is more like the white man's burden, which is also in the end bad for us, because it's always linked to this idea of being responsible for everything, and being having to educate and civilize everybody, and having to intervene and bring democracy or civilization everywhere. And I mean, you can say it was a noble deed by the British to stop slavery globally, but this then leads to America bringing democracy everywhere. I think this feeling of being constantly responsible for the whole world morally is also something that is responsible for the downfall and for this guilt complex we have today as white people.
Yeah, so basically, liberalism is white supremacism in a new garb, basically.
I know, yeah, that's the trick of Dugin. Everything's racism. Liberalism is racism. Everything's racism. You can call it in a way like that, and in a way even like this German guilt complex is an idea of being chosen and being Hegelian, in a Hegelian sense, the center of the Weltgeist. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good argument that works especially well with left-wing people, if you just basically explain them that they still have a very universalistic and Eurocentric ideology. So I think using their own ideology against them is very good. And I think and this typical anti-universalism of the Nouvelle Droite is in an academic sense, very effective, especially as against postmodernist left-wingers who don't really understand that they're basically still following monotheistic, universalistic, moralistic, and imperialistic philosophy. So I think against them, that's definitely very effective. I think my final point now this I think the understanding of cultural relativism is important in ethnopluralism, but where it stops for me is when you lose your own standpoint and you get lost in this nirvana of just relativism, and you basically also lose the attachment to your own ideology, or when you go into the other thing where you think like the world is a zoo where everything will be preserved and everybody has a right to its nation and identity. And here I'm more Schmittian and realistic. I think you have obviously the subjective right, the moral right to fight for your own nation, to preserve your own identity. Definitely nobody can talk you out of this right, but there's no objective right, no world government or world court where you can basically get and sue this right to preserve your identity and to exist. This does not really exist, and I think also we can never create a world in which every nation has a right of self-determination and of existence. I think that is unrealistic and would just be a different form of world government in the end.
Yes.
Thanks. I have to run, so
Okay.
let's
All
continue.
right. Thank you so much, Constantine. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
To see you. Okay, so yes, I think you're totally right that the problem is people thinking that they should govern the entire world. Okay, so here is your symbol. I'm very into your symbol. This is what I do for a living. I make brands. So I think about these things all day. I've heard that this is illegal. Is it true that your symbol is illegal?
It is illegal, and I don't even know if I will now get sued because I've shared the stream.
Oh God, that was me. That was a guy in America. I was just looking at it.
I have to pay. You have to pay like up to 2,000 euros if you show it.
Jeez.
It's great. It's not so you don't have to go to prison, but you have to pay fines. The movement, the logo was banned several years ago, and it was banned together with the logo of ISIS. So the logo of ISIS was banned, and the logo of a movement was banned. And it was because a right-wing government wanted to do something against radical Islam, but they were in coalition with the Green Party, and they said, yes, okay, but we only give you the ISIS logo if you give us the GI logo.
It's like,
And it was after the Islamic terrorist attack. After the Islamic terrorist attack in Vienna, the politicians banned the logo of a right-wing patriotic group.
That is insane. So what's the actual rule? I mean, it's like you're just out there doing political. First of all, you said earlier that you didn't want to be a party. You wanted to be a movement. So what is the difference between, of course, I can't pronounce this, but identity for, I don't know how to say it in English. How do I say your organization in English?
Identitarian movement would
identitarian.
be
Identitarian movement of Austria. Yeah. So, what is the difference between a movement and a party?
The party has the goal and the duty to win elections. That's why they always have to appeal to the masses and in a way appeal to the people as it is, which gives them a tendency to go to the center of the Overton window where there's the highest density of people. And the movement is not running for elections, and they have the goal to win the heart and minds and with popular provocation push the envelope of the Overton window to the right. And these are very different approaches, and that's why you need different people with different characters, and you have different means. The political party have their campaigns and their PR, and we have our actions and campaigns. And so I would say it's a very different thing, but both have to exist and both have to work together.
Okay, so you guys can put pressure basically on the parties to do stuff, because if they don't do if they don't act right, you guys can say, hey, what the hell? We need to demonstrate, or we need to, I don't know, what kind of tactics do you use?
We use demonstrations, but we also use actions. So there are a lot of different actions. For example, symbolic representation. You do something that a government should do in a symbolic way. For example, a big action we did with 100 activists. There was a border pass where a lot of illegals came from Italy to France after arriving in Italy. And we went there and just shut it down. We went there with 100 people. We built a border fence. We had helicopters there. It was a huge action. And obviously, we only could stay there for a few days. The police arrived. We were gone before they came. But it was a huge media attention. Afterwards, Macron was forced to shut this border down because there was so much attention on it. And we showed how easily it could be done and how it should be done. That's kind of the way how we do this. And also with our actions and activism, we get a lot of attention from the media because we enter a stage with a banner, for example, and then we can use this attention as a resource to popularize ideas or terms like remigration. And that's what we do, for example, with the term remigration. And that's what also the left is doing, like Black Lives Matter is doing with reparations and other ideas, And that's basically also what we've learned from the left. We've started a lot of their works everybody knows Rules for Radicals by Saul
I
Alinsky.
was just gonna bring it up. Yeah,
Fewer people know Gene Sharp's work, and he was one of the biggest inspirations for activism. Gene Sharp.
Gene Sharp. Yeah. So with regard to Alinsky, it's funny because I think kind of the underrated thing that's happening right now across the world, and certainly in America, is the right learning how to use Alinsky, right? I mean, that's like essentially what's happened. Is the left did it for however long they did, 40 years, and the right just kind of was like, okay. And then finally the right, like people on the right, like, smart people started being like, all right, we got to start playing with this playbook because we're just getting crushed. And I think that that's like kind of what's happening right now. So how do you have your ideas? Like when do you have like is it you and your boys like sitting around, you're boxing each other? You have a boxing club also. And then afterwards, how do you have the ideas?
Definitely, we spend a lot of time together. So obviously, I'm now a bit older than the average activist. I'm still organizing and doing actions also. But the young people, they all live very closely together. It's also very common for young activists to live together in what we call Wohngemeinschaften. So basically our students just share an apartment together, where everybody's in a room, but they basically live together. They meet at least once every week, mostly like several times. We have boxing lessons, we have movie nights, we have just party nights, we do hiking together. Last weekend, for example, 10 of our guys just drove to Paris and took part in a big demonstration there, and then an after party through like the club scene of Paris with other Parisian patriots. So it's a huge European network. And when you are
wait, say what that was. What do you mean they went? What exactly did they?
There was a demonstration in Paris. It's a big demonstration the Parisians do every year. We have a summer demonstration in Vienna every summer. Before that, we have a fight night where fighters from all European countries come, and we have a boxing tournament. If you're an identitarian, you can basically go to any big city in Europe, and you find activists there. You find a place to sleep there, basically for free. And so we live together. We spend a lot of time together. And then when something's happening, might be a terrorist attack, or for example, the first drag queen story time in Vienna, we just say, okay, it's the honor of our city. Also, all the other activist groups are looking at us. We need to do something. And for example, what we did back then is we walled the entrance up. So it was in a public library, and we went there at night with a little van full of bricks, and we just completely walled up the entrance with bricks. And then we painted a slogan on it. Obviously, like they tear down the bricks afterwards, but it was everywhere in the media. It was a huge thing, and it just showed the whole nation, but also even Europe, that there is a group of people who doesn't like that. And these are like the bonfires of resistance that activism creates. And obviously, this action led to many young people joining us. So that's how we come up with ideas. But lately, we are using Grok and AI. They also have great activism ideas.
Really? You just asked? Wait, you asked Grok?
No, yeah, actually, really. Like it was just one activist, and he tried it and pasted it as a joke in one of our chats. I have to say, these ideas were not bad. So, like, that's also how Elon Musk is helping our activism.
Wow! Just hey, how can we protest this? So, what did you write on the brick wall?
Basically, I need to look it up because there have been so many actions. I think we just put on the hashtag No Pride Month on the brick wall, and we let some leaflets there because it was an action for that. I can maybe find it and then share my screen so you can see.
Don't get imprisoned for sharing your logo.
No, it was we did not use this logo anymore. You know what I'm using?
Insane that you can't show the logo. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
But you know what? Overwatch, the shooter.
Wait.
You know Overwatch?
No. Overwatch. No, I'm not a gamer. But what is that? Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Overwatch because if you want to know why, just look at their logo. the Overwatch logo is just looking like
It's the
like
same
our
thing.
logo, and that's why, and that's how we did it, So
Nice. You're like, we're just talking about Overwatch. That's all. We're an Overwatch. Or you're an Overwatch club. That's what
we are an Overwatch. I've all of available Overwatch merch. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's how we get across it. So I just found. I'm gonna share my Chrome tab, then I can show it to you
Yeah.
how it looked like. So
Figure out how to do it.
screen share. Yeah. So this is if you put it in. This was the no Pride Month. Just the hashtag no Pride Month.
Okay.
And red, white, red. This is the flag of Austria.
Why English? Why in English?
Yeah, because the whole thing was very English, the Pride Month,
Yeah.
and so sorry, it was our counter hashtag.
Oh, got it. Well, wait. What do you mean it's very English? It's just this is coming from. It's coming from the West. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you know what? It was just the hashtag Pride Month in Vienna as well, and we just used this other hashtag to count it. Look, this was the video of the act.
Money boy, ich verticke blow, no homo.
So yeah, well, this was
a little hype video. Little hype video. Just for people who are listening only on their thing. It was like a hype video of them setting up this brick wall. Very well done. What in masks and stuff. What did it say
obviously,
behind the brick
these kind of actions are legally gray area, So that's obviously because that's why people wear those masks. But this, for example, was our last demonstration last summer. So if you maybe put it in, so just people see, can see what.
You want me to bring it back? You want me to bring it back?
Yeah, please. Like the window, just put another image in, so people just see. So this is basically the style of a demonstrations. This was our last demonstration in Vienna. The kids want remigration. There we don't wear masks. I'm not the biggest fan of masks. So actually, like for I would say a signature of our movement is that we always show our faces, because I think it's important that people can identify with people showing their faces. On the other hand, I also get it why people wear masks, because there's so much repression and you lose your job, and everything. But like this was what you mentioned. This was the boxing fight the night before in our cellar. This was the gang after the boxing fight in
wow. Look at that. That's this picture is sending tremors of fear throughout the hearts of globo homo throughout the world. And of course, by globo homo, I mean globo homogeneous. Homogeneous. That's what we actually mean.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
You got some ladies. You got some girls around.
Yeah, there are many. I would say, like, compared especially to other political movements, there are many girls in identitarian movements, because also like the style of activism we do is actions that girls just very often can take part in. So I mean, obviously, it's still I want to be like honest. It's a mostly male thing, but there are always also girls present in our circles.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're very good at making this. I just got back from AmFest here, which is Charlie Kirk's thing, and everybody says the exact same thing. And as you put it earlier, which was originally a Breitbart quote, they all are obsessed with culture. They all just talk about culture, which is funny because the left never talks about culture. They don't think about culture. They don't talk about culture. They just own culture. Whereas the right keeps coming back to this idea of culture. And it seems like one of the things you're really good at is creating a culture around this. It's not just about messaging. It's about cool videos and boxing and a community.
But you have to live it. It's more than just ideas. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life, and that's something that is has to come from within. And that's also, I think, what gives it such a strength and gives these young people this bravery. I just putting some images in of our activism so people can see for themselves what we're doing. And this is giving them the strength then to withstand all this repression, because obviously you get a lot of you get attacked a lot. It's also not good for your political career to show your face. And I understand it's not for everyone. I also don't say that everybody has to show their face or like do such an action with us. But I think it's important that this avant-garde exists, also just as a sign of life and idealism. Young people really just loving freedom, and I have to say it's also like I've lived so many adventures, so many cool things, like whether you're running away from the police after an action, or we once were on a boat in the Mediterranean or the Alps. I've done so many like cool things. My whole life is just filled with adventures. So I'm really grateful that I could have this activist past.
So do you give speeches?
A lot, yes. You don't need to put it in. I mean, you can put back our faces if you want. I don't know.
Okay,
I mean,
let's put our faces back. All right, there we go. Yeah.
Yes, I give a lot of speeches, especially in the past years when I've switched more to becoming an author. I'm doing a lot of reading tours. Next week, I'm gonna be in a different country giving a speech. The weekend after that, I'll be on the biggest conservative youth conference in Germany where I give a speech. So I give a lot of speeches at the moment.
Are you allowed to come? I watched a video of Lauren Southern, talking about you and your wife. And she was like, they were harassing her all the time because she's friends with your wife or something, and like not letting her leave. So is your travel restricted?
Yeah, it is. So I'm not allowed to go to the UK. I think at United States also not possible at the moment. I think the same goes for Canada and Australia. I've never tried Australia, but also Switzerland has banned me from entering Switzerland for several months, and Germany has banned me from entering Germany for several months. So at the moment, my movement is very restricted. But and sometimes even the German police, they just crash my events and basically try to hinder me from reading from my book talking about remigration. So at the moment, this repression has reached really very, very crazy levels.
Wow. So is there how do you get informed about this? Do they like send you a message? How do they tell you, hey, you've been banned from this country?
Yeah, I have a message from the UK, on the Home Office, that I'm banned indefinitely from the UK. Germany sent me a letter that I'm banned from Germany also indefinitely. I fought it, so now I can enter Germany.
So it's just like a letter.
It's a letter. And now it's really funny. So listen to this. It's I mean, I don't want to know how deep you want to go into that, but
no, it's
a fun story. So basically, at the moment, the German authorities have to hand me a letter. So they have to hand me a letter telling me I'm banned, and then they always ban me like 48 hours, because I think that's the maximum they can do without any bigger thing, from a certain city, which obviously destroys my speech, because it's on a certain date, and then they give it to me like right before the speech, and then they even like enter the clubs and the places with riot gear. But I'm now playing a lot of tricks with them. For example, I was putting on a mask of Greta Thunberg, and then activists went to the city with Greta Thunberg masks, and the police were hunting them down because they thought it's me. Or once, like the police tried to crash the event, find me, they didn't find me because I could sneak out. And the last thing I did is I rented a bus, and I just picked up all the people, and with the bus, we just drove a big circle around the city, and I gave my speech in this bus with this speaking system.
Yes. So it's like finding ways around it is that's like part of the fun. That's kind of like how you do more. Yeah, it's like, right.
No, you
Because
just
it's-
have to make fun of them. That's the most important thing. Humor is a weapon. It's even called laughterwism, activism, and laughter.
Yeah.
And that's what we always try to do. It's very important also especially as a right winger, when they already demonize you, not to always have this grim and evil face and look very stern. You just have to really laugh at them, which is easy because they're very, very ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and this is why, again, the left has given us such a massive opportunity by becoming so culturally hegemonic and so intolerant that even if we didn't do anything at all, they would have made it cool to be right wing. All you have to do is say the slightest right wing thing, and you're cool. In LA, we're really experiencing this. I mean, in LA and New York, we've had these two like cultural scenes. In New York, it was called Dime Square. In LA, it's much smaller, but we have like a scene here. I had a party for Trump for the election. There were like 100 people there. Wow. And it was just, it's all like, e-girls and art people, because they're just like, oh, give me something. They need some edge. They're like, give me some kind of edge. And it's so easy. All you got to do is just be like, I'm a little bit right wing, and people will come flocking. So before you go though, let's, in this last 15 minutes, remigration. I saw Tom Homan, who's our new, hopefully our new immigration czar or whatever. And he's got all these plans for mass deportations. It's about getting the criminals first, and then you have to track people down. But there's also this policy here called, it's not catch and release, but it's like, it's basically catch and release. And a ton of people here are on catch and release basis. So it's about wrapping that all up. How does remigration actually happen? Because do you guys even have a border patrol? I mean, what do you guys, how would that work even?
At the moment, the border patrol, we have Frontex and the European border, but also Austria, Germany is actually like just a welcome service.
Yeah.
As soon as a migrant says,
cupcakes and juice, just
silent,
like, come on
are forced to bring him in. It's a welcome service. It's not a border patrol. It's crazy, It's like as if a warden in a bank, if you enter as a robber, would say, welcome, here's
come
the money.
On in. Yeah.
That's how it is today. So it's just a joke. But at the same time, we have European countries like Hungary who are actually doing pushbacks, which means if you try to enter Hungary without having a permit to enter Hungary, without having papers, they just push you back. Or now, since they've been sued by the European Union, they just funnel the migrants to Germany. And that's also, in a way, what Italy is doing, what many countries are doing, which I understand, because first they really tried, or like Poland, to have border fences and keep them out. And then the European Union sued them for keeping them out. Wow. Then they funneled them to Germany. And now they try to sue them for not taking their share of migrants and of, it's called resettlement. So it's a resettlement program of Arabs to Europe, also official term for that. And obviously, Poland, Hungary just don't want to become like Germany or France. So that's the conflict now in the European Union.
Right, but so what happens? I mean, how do you get these people? How does remigration begin? What organization do you use?
It begins with protecting your border, obviously, because if you protect your border, and people understand they cannot come, and if they come, they're always brought back, always, without exception, all the time. They will stop paying a human trafficker, and then the whole thing will break down. The Australia-Norway policy showed it could work, and we see it like all the Arabs now want to come to Europe. They don't want to come to Saudi Arabia. They don't want to go to Qatar, although these countries are beautiful, very rich, all the influencers live there, but they know they have no chance to stay there. They have to go in there illegally. Second thing is, all the illegals who live here obviously have to go home, which is also clear as the daylight. Like normally, the asylum status only lasts for 3 years and have to be renewed. You can take it away or just let it run out. But after at least 3 years, all of them should be home. Then you have a lot of other foreigners who live here with a different status, why they're here, live different permit. You need to check all of those. Many of those don't work, live of social welfare, have committed crimes. They all also can go home. That's also clear. And if you've done this, like phase 1 or 2, you already got rid of many problems in parallel societies. And then I think you also need to change the overall migration system. You mentioned the Hart-Celler Act. I think you should only have this kind of migration that is economically beneficial, but also not a cultural burden and problem and issue. And you had this kind of, in America, where you had this quota system to preserve the ethno-cultural identity of the American nation, which is logical, because that's what made America was the consistency, the structure of the American demography. And if you want to keep America American, you should also keep this structure. And I think that would be the same in Europe, where you can say, okay, like European migration or migration from Western countries is something which is easiest to stomach and which can be beneficial in some cases. I mean, my wife is an American herself, so.
Oh, right. They're going to hang you up on that. They're going to say, you married an immigrant.
Actually, it's true. Like my son even has a migration background, so that's true.
Yeah.
And I'm also experiencing a lot of racism from German left-wingers today. They say, this Austrian, they call me racial slurs, and I'm racist.
Is there any real difference? Is there a difference though? Sorry to interrupt, but is there really any? Can you tell visually a difference between an Austrian and a German?
Well, yes. I know, not really, but I would say like Southern Germans and Bavarians. The thing is the following: like between Prussians, Northern Germans, and Southern Germans, like Bavarians or Austrians, there's a little difference, even in looks a bit. But obviously, like the Bavarians who are Germans and the Austrians have way more in common than the Bavarians and the Prussians. So I understand. Obviously, we're like there's an ethnocultural common shared identity. But a guy once said, what is separating the Austrians from the Germans is the common language. So we have our dialect, we have our own cultural quirks. And obviously, Austria has a bit of a different history because of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and always being basically the capital of this huge Balkan Empire. That's a bit of a difference. And in the past, decades, I would say like 60 years, also there was kind of a national identity formed in Austria around being this neutral, small country. Which is also the reason why Austria is now way more right-wing and patriotic, because this guilt-tripping and this self-hatred wasn't forced on Austria so severely like on Germany, because the Allied and the Communists wanted Austria to be a neutral bloc, between East and West. Then they wanted Austria to never go back to Germany again. And so they, in a way, let this kind of Austrian patriotism, this Austrian exceptionalism grow in a way. And one result of this is that today I would say the Austrians have this national identity, and the other result is that the Austrians don't hate themselves as much as Germans do.
A commenter here says, Austria is rightfully German territory. What do you have to say to this?
Sorry, I muted myself. No. I'm very happy that we're not part of Merkel's Germany.
Yeah. Right.
And I have to say, here it is. When it comes, like, consonant is gone, so we don't need to talk about cultural relativism and Boas again. So I would say Austria is really superior in every sense because we have just like amazing food, and we have the German language, and we have like some kind of German rigidity and like efficiency, but not too much. When German efficiency becomes annoying and the food becomes boring and everything becomes just a bit annoying, that's where Austria stops.
Got it. You guys have a little more of that European romantic thing going on.
Exactly, but not like in Italy and France, where like things start maybe like to get a bit crazy and not working so well.
Yeah,
or like
at least you guys show up at work in the morning, unlike the Italians.
It's just the perfect mix of I'm sorry to say, but the most important things about Austrians, like I would say what's really the most admirable things about Austria is our modesty and how humble we are.
Yeah, nice, funny. In Austria, What's your actual experiences with immigrants? Have you like brawled on the streets with Islamists? I mean, are you seeing these people every day in Vienna? Do you have any exposure to them actually?
I see them every day, exposed to them all the time, because when you go to a train station, when you go to a supermarket, you don't feel at home anymore in Vienna. If you go to Budapest, Hungary, and Prague, you feel more at home as an Austrian than in the city, because there are more people who are closer to you in a way, culturally and how they behave, than in your own city. So I would say it's a constant feeling of being alienated in your own nation, which is really, really hard. And also, it means if you have a family and children, it gets even harder, because you have to get into a private school or move out or something like that, because otherwise your child has no future. Brawled, I have not. But if I wanted to, I could do it every day. I just need to go with 3 other Austrian guys into a certain area, stand my ground, look those people in the face, not lower my eyes, not behave like a cock, and just go there, stand there, and put out dominance. And then I would end up basically with a knife in my stomach. And if I go there with my wife, no, that happens all the time. You have all the time people being beaten up, being stabbed because they talked back, because they looked back, because they defended their girlfriend, which does mean we don't go in these areas anymore. And I also have to say, I also don't do it because I don't want to get stabbed in the stomach just by some Syrian who just jumped off the bus, for a stupid fight and quarrel. But that means a big part of our own city, of our own public sphere, is lost to indigenous people, and that's what's happening. And there's a death toll, weekly death toll. If you put in Germany, daily death toll. In Germany, every day there are 2 gang rapes. And every day there are, I think, like 15 or 17 sexual attacks by foreigners, and that's just happening also on this day when you watch this stream.
Did you follow the story in UK with the rape gangs? What was that? What was that story? I didn't really understand that. That seemed like kind of strange to me. What was that story?
In which way don't you understand it? Like, what's your how did you?
Because it wasn't just like they were like grabbing girls off the street. It was like they were somehow grooming them. I didn't understand like actually what was happening exactly. Because like when you're saying a gang rape, do you mean that it's like they're grabbing them off the street? Is that what you mean, or is it?
Yes, in Germany. What I'm talking Germany about is not grooming gangs, it's gang rapes where they're grabbing them off the street because they're reported to the police, In these cases, I would say in the UK, it was really grooming. It's the lover boy method. So you had these young girls who were not supervised by their parents, who were in lower social classes. And that's always the people who are hit the most, because those people who get the migrants in, they live in the elite little areas. They live in almost 100% white indigenous areas. Their own children go to private schools, and they are lawyers or journalists. And obviously no lawyer and journalist comes from the Southern American border in. So there's no concurrence for them. On the contrary, sorry for I'm meandering a bit here, Collier, he wrote the book Exodus. He said migration is a net negative for the middle and lower class, but it's a net positive for the upper class, because the upper class is not affected by these immigrants. There are no concurrence in their labor market. They don't live where they live. They're somewhere completely different, but they have cheap labor, and for them it means cheap delivery services, cheap prostitutes, cheap cleaning ladies, cheap nannies, for the children, and that's how they see migrants, and that's why they think all these migrants are so nice. And there was this saying by one American rock star, I think, a Democrat one. She said, like, if we have no Mexicans, who will clean the toilets? And she got a lot of backlash for that. And that just shows how they see migrants and migrations.
Yeah,
and
they want slaves. It's always been slaves. It's always the same thing. The funny thing is, though, and I still say this, if you could actually get a cleaning lady for cheap in Los Angeles, nobody would. So many more people would be okay with open borders. That's not the case. You're paying the cleaning lady like a lot of money. It's just, so the system doesn't work as they say it does. It only works for the real elites who are, did you see this whole H-1B thing?
Yes.
The whole H-1B. So if you imagine you're an employer, you have a head count, 500, you need 500, engineers of some kind. You can pay those 500 engineers 30 grand less each a year. That's not even that much. It's a difference between 100,000, 70,000. Not really that much. That's $15 million. So that's where it only really works at scale. It's not like an individual really gets that much of a benefit. Yeah.
I also really don't like this notion of the nation is like a football team.
Yeah, I hate that. Yes,
the nation is something way more.
Yeah,
and
it's an idea. Yeah.
Exactly. And imagine if you have your mother and your family, and then your dad says, well, are we going to kick our mom out? We get this other lady in because she can cook 10% faster, and she spends like 20% less household money. Okay, well, I don't care. Of course, a nation is not like a family, but it resembles a family. It's a pact between the living, those who have passed away, and those to come, to quote Burke. But going back to this grooming gang scandal, it was a systematic way of these Pakistani gangs to take those young girls who did not have the luxury of being upper class, basically using this lover boy method, like telling them in love with them, taking care of them, but also giving them alcohol and drugs. It was kind of scheme, drugging them, and then raping them again and again, then blackmailing them with photos they made. And basically, obviously, these girls, like, they claimed in front of court, these people, that these were just white sluts and they just agreed, to do that. But if you're 12 years old, of course you cannot agree. But for them, these young girls who were not supervised by parents or brothers or a big gang and clan, obviously were free. That's their mindset, because in their own country, every woman is guarded, by their brothers, by their parents, and she's kept in the house. And a woman who's outside and is free to take is just as free to take as free ice cream. That's just how they see that, because that's their mentality.
Yeah, that's how they've grown up, right? That's
why it was so systematic, and it doesn't have to be a conspiracy by them. For them, it was just normal. If these white Christian sluts, have no family to protect them.
Yeah, and they're free picking, which is like, I don't know, maybe there's something to that, but they ain't ready for that conversation. But I'm just kidding. No, I'm just saying it's like, you should see how women walk around in Los Angeles. It's like, they're wearing no clothes whatsoever, and it's.
If this grooming Pakistanis would go to this Bonnie lady, like this OnlyFans girl who has like 1,000 men in 10 minutes. I don't know, I'm sure you saw her get bombarded with this annoying dead eye woman. Okay, well, they can do that, but it's about children.
It's about actual children, right? Yeah, it's about real girl. Yeah,
it's really systematic genocidal rape, and it's that's how Elon Musk said it, and I just can't stress it. And it's crazy that this was just ignored. Tommy Robinson talked about it. I talked about it as well. We made a lot of activism about it, but only now it's really surfacing because of X. Because on X, for the first time in, I would say, the history of the internet, with a big platform with almost no censorship. I know the HP1 stuff, there was censorship. I don't think you can say anything on X, that's true. But you can say more than you ever could say on a platform on a consistent basis. And I think that's why you have these conversations coming up right now, because that's what organically should happen.
Totally. So, all right, last question, then I got to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. You have, I've heard that you have this saying, defend Vienna like it's 1683. Is that true?
True.
And that's like a reference to the Habsburgs? Is it kicking out the Muslims or something? Is that what it is? Somebody?
Yeah, it's a reference to the big siege of Vienna. It's a big siege of Vienna in this year, and it's one of the biggest things in Viennese Austrian history. You see it everywhere in the city. There are a lot of monuments about it, and it was one of the deciding hours of Europe. It was one of the biggest battles. It was the biggest cavalry charge in human history by German, Polish, French troops who then freed the city just 2 days before its fall. Very epic. There are a lot of good YouTube videos about it from YouTube history channels. It's really cool. And I hope after wokeness dies, there'll be a Netflix series about it. And obviously for us, like our big heroes, Leonidas, from the movie 300, Prince Eugen, who freed the Balkans from the Ottoman yoke. These are basically our history, because for us, it's very important to be rooted in our history and know our history, because you can only love what you know, and to love your nation, your people, you need to know its history.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't there a food that comes from that victory that is widely consumed?
True. Yeah.
Croissants, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Didn't they celebrate by eating? Because it's a Muslim crescent. People don't realize that the croissant is a Muslim thing, and you're eating it because you're like defeating the Muslims.
And that's an important thing. You see, the croissant comes actually from Austria. It was invented in Austria. Here it's called Kipferl. And very often, like bakery was created after big battle or a king was enthroned. And there are a lot of credible sources that say this kind of, as you say, Kipferl or croissant should resemble a crescent moon, was a mockery. And there's even a fatwa by, I think, an Egyptian sheikh who says Muslims shouldn't eat it. And coffee, as we drink it today, also comes from the siege of Vienna. There was this one guy, he was a Polish spy, Korzystki, and he, dressed up as a Turk, would go down the water wall, sneak into the Turkish camp. Like 15,000 Viennese defenders surrounded by 200,000, 300,000 Turks. And he got information and then brought it back. And several times he was always shot because they thought he was an invader. And then he could choose what he wanted from the camps of the Turks after the siege was lifted and the Turks ran away. And the story says he chose like a big package, a big storehouse full of coffee, and opened up the first coffee house in Vienna.
Wow.
And the Turkish coffee, as you know, is just a coffee with sugar, because they don't have lactose intolerance in the area. And then in Vienna, because it was too bitter, they started mixing the coffee with milk. And the cappuccino, that you might know, comes from the Austrian Kapuziner monk, which is a monk who has a brown shirt and a white cap. And that's like the coffee looks like, the brown coffee with the white cream, whipped cream on top, the Cappuccino. And that's where the cappuccino comes from.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to go eat a croissant and have a cappuccino right now.
Exactly.
In celebration against Islam. Thank you so much, man. This was really, really great. Absolutely fascinating. Man, stay in touch, and best of luck. Is there anything you want to shill before you go?
Well, no, I just want to thank you as well. I'm very happy for this conversation. Especially thank you very much that you did this, because I think your area is affected now, obviously, also by this huge fires.
Oh yeah,
So really, I hope everything goes well there, and I've also been following it, and I wish all the best wishes for people who have been affected by this monstrous fire. I hope that we all just go into a better year, and everything goes well with the inauguration. And I hope we keep this dialogue, this transatlantic dialogue between dissidents going. Thank you.
Cool, man. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good one. I'm gonna play now.
Bye.